I'm good. Welcome everyone to our TRM and Social Hour. Tonight we bring you an Ask Me Anything with author Jane Lindskold. Hello, Jane.
Hello.
Award-winning New York Times bestselling author of over 25 novels, including the Firekeeper Saga, the two Athenor novels, Changer and Changer's Daughter, the Breaking the Wall series, the Artemis Awakening series, and many more. She has also written in collaboration with David Weber, Fred Saberhagen, and Roger Zelazny.
Zelazny.
All right. So if you have a question for Ms. Lindskold, please message Diane or me in the chat and we will put you in the queue. When it's your turn, we will call your name and you will be able to unmute your microphone, turn your video back on if you so choose, and ask your question. Until then, we ask that all attendees please keep their microphones on mute as a courtesy to other attendees and our guests.
Let's start with some general questions while the social crew gets their questions formulated. Ms. Lindskold, can you start out by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, it's Dr. Lindskold, since that's the current meme. I was born in Washington, D.C. I went to Fordham University for my bachelor's, master's, and PhD. Then I moved to South Central Virginia, where I taught for 5 years at Lynchburg College. And then I threw all practicality, reasonableness, and intelligence to the wind and became a full-time writer. And I've been a full-time writer since 1994. And I have been living in New Mexico since the middle of 1994. I've been married for 24 years as of Monday, yay.
Yay!
To the gentleman whose name is on the screen instead of mine because we didn't know how to change it on the Zoom feed. Sorry. He's an archaeologist, recently retired from working with the Museum of New Mexico.
Oh, awesome.
We have 3 cats, 2 guinea pigs, indoor fish, outdoor fish, and a garden who, listening to all of you people talk about rain and snow, I have to laugh. I live in a state where we get 7.5 inches of rain a year. So the garden definitely qualifies as an extra pet because it takes a lot of care.
Yeah. Yep. So let's, what was the first inspiration you had that made you decide to pick up the pen? And was that when you realized that writing was your vocation, or was there another impetus for that?
My original storytelling actually started out as verbal. I'm the oldest of 4 kids and a really active dreamer. So my sister Anne used to have to put up with me waking up in the morning and telling her my dreams. And of course, since dreams don't have good continuity, I'd have to invent the continuity along the way. And then I lucked out, and my youngest sister is about 8 years younger than I am. So just about the point that my siblings who were closer in age were done with pretend, I lucked out and I had somebody who wanted to continue. So the 2 of us would make up stories together. And somewhere along the line, it's really funny, and this is where having siblings is cool. I would have said I started actually trying to write things down when I was in college. But my sister Anne says that I was writing things down before then. I never finished anything. And when we were taking turns cleaning our joint living space, she said she kept finding pieces of paper with things written on them that had fallen, behind a table or behind a radiator or whatever. And she'd read it, and I never finished it, and it really frustrated her. Happily, she now reads all my books, bless her heart. So definitely for me, it was a really gradual transition between oral storytelling and written storytelling. But in college, I did start trying to scribble. I discovered role-playing games. And in fact, one of my college gaming buddies was one of your guests a couple of weeks ago.
Really?
Yeah.
Curious.
Chuck Gammon.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I've known Chuck since I was about 19 or 20. I can't remember which. But gaming was definitely, you start writing background stories for characters or whatever. So there you go. There's the background.
That is really quite cool. What a small world it is, definitely. So
Mhm.
most authors have a tried and true process for world building and character development. Do you have one, and what is your process?
Actually, are you familiar with the terminology that there are um, pantsers and plotters, outliners, or uh, non-outliners?
Yep.
Yes.
I'm kind of so far on the intuitive side of the scale that for me, my world building is something that often happens as I write. This doesn't mean I don't research. I do extensively. I've got bibliographies for most of my books, but I don't research, I don't world build until I walk into the place with my character.
Oh, that's cool.
Cool.
Thank you.
That's very cool.
But I do a lot of research. For example, with the Firekeeper books, I did so much research into wolves that I was asked to be a keynote speaker at a scientific conference. And when I went to look at the poster presentations that had been done, there was one that had been done on the question of reintroducing wolves into the wild in the West Southwest. And I had read every book on this experts list.
Cool.
So being an intuitive plotter for me doesn't mean I don't research. It just means it often happens along the way.
Cool. Speaking of the Firekeeper saga, the first book of yours that I read was actually Through Wolf's Eyes, which is the first book of that series. And I have to say, I loved it so much that I like burned through the entire series in like 2 months.
Congratulations.
I got to the point where it was like, oh, okay, I'm caught up. Where's the next one? You know? So I absolutely, I fell in love from the very beginning, and I adore the series. Did you go into writing the first book in that series with the whole series in mind, or did that sort of develop organically?
It developed organically as I went along. The first book, I very much love the motif of a feral person raised by wild animals, and I picked wolves because I've had a thing about wolves since I was very small. And the only thing I really knew going into that was that I felt like Burroughs with Tarzan and Kipling with Mowgli had done a really great job with the feral child first, you might call alien encounter story. So that if I was going to do something with Firekeeper, I needed to have a larger conception from the start. I didn't want it to just be the alien first encounter novel. So I crossed it with the political succession tale and built from there. And then Wolf's Head, Wolf's Heart grew organically out of the events in Through Wolf's Eyes.
Sure. That makes total sense to me, just having read them. And I just was wondering if you planned it out that far in advance or it sort of developed. So
no, I sort of live them with my characters, which is a lot of fun.
So Firekeeper was raised by wolves in the series, and the wolves never appear to be companions. They are fully fleshed out characters in their own right. Animals figure prominently in your writing in several of your stories, Breaking the Wall, and of course, there are the Tree Cats in the Star Kingdom series. So animals are often depicted differently by different cultures. How do those cultural differences affect the way you write your animal characters?
Well, for example, the Breaking the Wall books had a lot to do with Chinese myth and legend. So in Western culture, the rat is considered schemy, dirty, polluting, evil, etc. Whereas in Chinese culture, practically the best thing in the world a family can have is a child born in the year of the rat, because rats are viewed as highly intelligent. Hey, there's a year of the rat, man. All right. Highly intelligent, prudent, able to store things, very capable of calculating. So I definitely shaped how the different animal-human relationship characters were more on the Chinese perception than on the Western European cultural tradition, and went throughout. So I very much go back to the mythological or cultural roots for something like that.
Very cool.
Cool. Yeah, it was so interesting to me to read. I guess I haven't read that many books, other books where the animal characters are actually like a complete character in their own and not just somebody's companion.
Yeah. Well, back when I wrote through Wolf's Eyes, it was written completely before I sold it. And my agent gave it to Teresa Nielsen Hayden, well, actually to Tor Books. And Patrick Nielsen Hayden turned it over to his wife and co-editor, Teresa. And Teresa told me afterwards that for her, the winning point on the book was, she said, when I realized that you were actually going to go to the trouble of keeping this enormous wolf around, and it wasn't going to die as an object lesson to the main character about how fragile life is and all of that stuff, she said, I was sold.
Yeah.
That's what won the book for me.
Yeah.
I hate the Red Pony, Old Yeller, Lad a Dog, all those other books where the animals just exist to be killed as object lessons for stupid humans. I was really determined to give them,
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And that's one of the things that I love so much about your stories and all of your animal characters across your different series.
Mhm.
So we have a bit of a commercial break here. A Matter of Honor LARP is coming November 12th through 14th. There are still a few TRMN spots left. So if you're interested, don't forget, this is a once in a lifetime chance. We are not doing this LARP again. If you want to be involved with it, head to the website, which is www.matterofhonorlarp.com, and hit the enlistment button and find out more information and sign up today. In addition, the Bureau of Supply has a uniform order open right now. They also have the new shaped berets that you can order on the site. Those are available. And Megan tells me that there will be a name badge order going in next week. So if you need a name badge, contact BUSUP. So moving on back to our regularly scheduled program. Most TRMN members know you from your collaboration with David Weber in the Star Kingdom series. How did that collaboration come about, and what was it like writing in someone else's established universe?
Okay, can I back up and give you some foundations?
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I've known Weber, and I call him Weber because when we met, I had way too many Davids in my life. So, you know, I have a brother-in-law named David. I was at that point married to a guy named David. I taught with two people named David. You know, so he became Weber, and to this day, that's what I call him. So it's not deep and abiding respect or anything like that. It's you, in a sense, it's my nickname for him. But when I met Weber, it was long enough ago that I had one published short story. I have over 70 now, and he had 1.5 novels. So we've been friends for a long time and sort of accidentally bonded. I'm not quite sure how it happened because we're really different in a lot of ways. But we met at a con in Greenville, South Carolina, and hit it off. And then one day he was coming up through where I was at that point living in Lynchburg, Virginia. And he was coming up for a con, and his faithful car broke down. And he ended up staying with me for a week. And, you know, after that, it was just whatever. So we're not just collaborators, we're friends going back to when he still had long hair and I gave him ponytail holders for Christmas.
Long hair. Oh, yeah. You
Wow.
tell us.
When I met him, he had a ponytail. I mean, you know, so one day he called me up. By then I was living in New Mexico, etc. It was summertime because I remember I put on my phone and headset and went out to pick string beans in the garden. And he started bubbling about how YA fiction was suddenly a really, really hot target item. He and Tony had been talking about things to do and expanding the Stephanie Harrington story from A Beautiful Friendship. What did I think? Wouldn't it be fun? Wouldn't it be fun? Come on, come on, play with me. You know him, so you know exactly. And one thing led to another, and that's how we got into that project. Part of the appeal for me was I didn't have to do military, which just does not turn me on at all. Also, another one was the Tree Cats. I like non-human characters, and I think that was part of why he approached me, is because he knows that I tend to think non-human. So that was that. As far as writing in someone else's universe, I've got to split that into two parts. Part number one is I had already written in someone else's universe. Roger Zelazny, who, it makes me terribly sad to realize there are adult readers today who did not grow up in a world where one of the landmarks of every year was when the new Roger Zelazny novel came out and just about everybody read it. I see nods. But Roger and I stumbled into one of those relationships that, quite frankly, if I read about it in a book, I wouldn't believe in it, because people do not meet and fall in love the first time they meet each other. But we did, and we ended up living together. And as he was finally beginning to accept that he might not survive the cancer that killed him, he asked me if I would complete the 2 books he had in process at that time, because like me, Roger was an intuitive plotter. He didn't outline or anything like that. And he said, I need somebody who knows how I think. You're the only person who could do these. So by the time Weber approached me to do work with him, he knew I had already completed those 2 posthumous collaborations for Roger, and that I could slide into somebody else's head and somebody else's world. To this day, though many scholars have tried, no one has accurately pinpointed where I took over from Roger on those books, which is what I wanted, because I knew Roger's readers didn't want me. They wanted the last Roger. And when I'm writing with Weber, I feel a great respect for the Honorverse and for the style of the Honorverse and things like that. So while I definitely go out of my way to contribute, I also feel like Weber's readers will want a recognizable Honorverse. They are not going to want Jane Lindskold's take on the Honorverse. Also, by the time I had written those books, I had done several novellas in the world. I'm the one who fleshed out the background of Queen Elizabeth and how her father's death affected her and stuff like that. So I'd already written in the Honorverse and was at least somewhat familiar with it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being a part of that.
Yeah.
So you wrote in both Fire Season and Tree Cat Wars, more stories with animals as characters.
Right.
What is your favorite part or parts about writing in the Star Kingdom series specifically, in what you did?
I really like the Tree Cats. I really like fleshing out their culture. In Weber's books, they're very often companion animals, though he does a really good job when he can. The stress of those books doesn't let you get into tree cat background and tree cat culture in the same way. But Stephanie Harrington is the person who made first contact with tree cats. So we can have entire plot lines that are tree cat plot lines in those books, whereas Nimitz and the rest have to take second stage to the humans and the battles and the exploding ships and the gun of the week and the laser platforms and everything else. I really like exploring tree cat culture and motivations.
Oh, excuse me.
Bless you.
Bless you.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about your nonfiction book, Wanderings in Writing, and also your Wednesday Wanderings blog. I've actually, I read the book, and I have kind of followed the blog and really enjoyed it. It's kind of fun to follow along with what you're up to every week.
Thank you.
And I've even gotten some really great reading suggestions from it, which is really cool for me because I read voraciously.
She does.
I'm always looking for something new to read. Can you tell us a little bit about the book and the blog and kind of the impetus behind both of them? I know they're not, they're separate things, but.
Sure, the blog grew out of a desire to do outreach, but I live in the north, in New Mexico. Those of you who live in more populous areas of the country, Weber, if he wants, can hit a con a weekend, and did early in his career, just a day trip drive. In where I live, there is one science fiction convention in New Mexico, one in Denver, Colorado, one in Phoenix, Arizona, sort of one in Tucson, Arizona, and all Denver, Phoenix, Tucson are all 8-hour plus drives for me. So if I was going to have just that kind of casual, friendly contact with the people who read my stuff, a blog was pretty much a necessity. It's called Wanderings, Wednesday Wanderings, because it appears every Wednesday, and it's Wanderings because I wanted to feel free to write about whatever I felt like writing about. I was one of Tor.com's earliest bloggers, but they always expected me to write about either what I was writing or about writing in general. And I really didn't feel like I should be required to do 52 writing lessons a year. But the funny thing is I found that I love writing, and I wrote about writing a lot more than I thought I would. And eventually people started gently nagging me to put some of them together in a book so they didn't have to go to the blog site and print out things. So that's how the book Wanderings on Writing came to be. It's a very low key, I'm not promising to make you a bestseller next week, but on the other hand, if you're curious about research strategies or things you need to think about when world building or whatever, that there are a bunch of short essays arranged in a more or less associational fashion. It's meant to be a bathroom book. It's meant to be the book you stick in the bathroom and you read a short essay, not a boot camp.
Yeah, I found that with that book, what interested me or what caught me the most, because I'm not a writer, I don't aspire to write. I have too many other things on my life that I'm an artist and I do other things. So I don't have time to write. And I don't know that I have the patience to write. But what I liked about that book was that, like you said, it was a bunch of short blips about writing, and it really opened my eyes to how an author's brain works when they're developing a story. And that has given me more appreciation when I read books for, wow, here's the story and what must, here's probably, the probability of how this grew. And it helped me in understanding kind of the author's thoughts behind their stuff.
Yeah, my two favorite essays in there are the one about what to expect if you live with a writer, and what in turn a writer should really have as a realistic expectation from what their family and friends should be expected to think. Those are my two favorite pieces, because I think a lot of budding writers have a very unrealistic idea as to just how important their writing is to the universe around them.
Right.
But conversely, I've seen more relationships with writers break up because people think it's really, really cool to date a writer. And then they find out that writers are excruciatingly boring because they spend all their time with people who don't really exist, and are quietly and intently thumping away at a keyboard or talking into their dragon, naturally speaking, or whatever. So I thought it was kind of important to touch into that, because I really have seen a lot of relationships break up. I'm really lucky with Jim, my husband, because he was friends with the local New Mexico Writers Circle when we met. That's how I met him, actually, was we were in a role-playing group together with George R.R. Martin and Walter John Williams and Melinda Snodgrass. And
I was going to say, what is it with all the writers in New Mexico?
I moved here because that's where Roger was. I stayed. Here's a Weber story that I think you'll like, and it says a lot about his personality. But after Roger died, Sharon and him hadn't admitted that they were in love with each other. That was the funniest courtship. But Sharon looked at Weber and said, "Go to New Mexico, see Jane. If she's not being taken care of, bring her home. We'll take care of her." And he did. He came out, but I stayed in New Mexico because there was a writing community out here where if I wanted to talk shop, I didn't have to explain the terminology, the difference between an editor and an agent and a publisher and whatever.
Sure.
But Sharon, I'm sure you guys all know about the incredibly wonderful soap opera of Weber and Sharon's courtship, so I won't retell it. But Jim and I were definitely on deck, and in fact, Sharon told me she was going to accept Weber's proposal before she told him.
Yeah.
That's cute. That's great.
It
So
was
you're also a gamer.
I am.
So we're going to touch back about how you said you really love doing RPGs. What is one of your favorite games there? And do you have a favorite setting to play in? And in regards to all of that, what are some of the lessons some writers can take from role-playing games in handling character relationships, magic, and the supernatural?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I know, it's kind of a long one.
If I forget anything, remind me. I
Yes, ma'am.
started gaming as an 17-year-old college freshman. The first AD&D books were just coming out then. And I mean, literally, like I think the Player's Handbook had just come out. And there was a little bit in the magazine way back in the day. Some of you with no silver in your hair probably don't remember these funny things called magazines, weekly news magazines. But there was this Newsweek on campus in the gimme bag for enrolling freshmen, and it included an article on this odd thing called Dungeons and Dragons. And I mentioned it to a girl I had just met and said, "Wow, this sounds cool." And she said, "Oh, really? Do you think so? I bought the box set this summer and I'm really interested." So I was basically not out of freshman orientation before I was hooked on role-playing games. And I've stayed hooked steadily since, which means I've been gaming pretty much steadily for 40 years now.
Gotcha.
And in fact, when I moved to New Mexico with Roger, I said to him once we were settled, I said, the only thing I miss from my old life is gaming. And he said, well, I think George has a gaming group. Let me find out if he can, recommend where you might look for one. And then George invited me and Roger to come and game, and we did. My favorite system, I like GURPS. I prefer 3rd edition, but the reason is I really like games that are based on storytelling. And quite frankly, in real life, people might have professions, but they don't have character classes. And so I always find myself balking at a game system that has character classes. Once I discovered once I discovered skill-based systems rather than character class-based systems, I pretty much was a GURPS junkie. I've played other systems since, and it's not hard and fast, but that's my preference. What's my favorite setting? I like settings that involve, just like what I write and read, fantasy and science fiction. Oddly enough, when I moved to New Mexico and started playing with the group, we had all of these fantasy and science fiction writers who were playing cops and robbers games. And I played because that's what was being played. But what I really like is fantasy science fiction games.
I have to.
Yeah. Toss me the rest of the question. I'm sure I've forgotten something.
What were some lessons writers can take from role-playing games and handling character relationships, magic, and the supernatural?
Okay, from role-playing games on handling characters, magic, and the supernatural. First of all, everybody who's a gamer loves and then I rolled a D20, I criticaled, I cut through whatever, or the reverse, and then I fumbled, and the referee said my sword had snapped in two, or whatever. And while a little bit of that might work in a fiction, it really doesn't work. You can learn about character, I think, pretty well from role-playing games, but you can't really learn about plot, because plot in a novel is not dictated by rolls of the dice and whether somebody fumbled or whatever. It has to be more organically connected. Character, one of the things I really like about the GURPS system is they have advantages and disadvantages. And an advantage is pretty obvious, but a disadvantage, how they define it, is anything that restricts your character's choice of action. So that includes honesty. That includes a code of honor. That includes allies. That includes dependents. And that's something to think about when writing. What are the things that, let's look at honor, since that's a good example that all of you know, is Nimitz is a huge disadvantage to honor. Yes, he's an advantage in that he gives her that added empathy, and he has those great claws and all those other things, but he's a huge disadvantage because he restricts her choices of action. She can't be away from him beyond a certain distance. If something happens to him, she's in danger of dying, and vice versa for him. So from role-playing, it's interesting to think of things that people normally think of as advantageous traits, having an animal companion, or being honest, noble, loyal, true, and realizing they restrict your actions, so they're actually disadvantages, and working from it that way. Setting, I think my biggest problem that I see when I look at writing where people came out of gaming is they have no sense of geography. They have no, I have literally looked at gamers fiction where, rivers run uphill, mines occur for no apparent reason except you need a place for people to go underground, because that's where the adventure is going to be. So there's no sense of, most gamers are a little bit crippled on the ecological, geographical, geological, etc. front. If you have steel weapons in your world, somebody is mining iron. Somebody is burning stuff to heat that iron to a usable point. So are they clear cutting? Are they using coal? Do they have cooperative dragons who provide the heat? What do they give the dragons to get them to do that? It's whatever. So gaming can be an advantage, but it can be a tremendous disadvantage as well. The other thing is that gamers, when they write, have too much of a tendency to put in too many details. You're used to playing a game where you play every minute of 2 weeks on a shipboard, and maybe there's a shipboard romance or whatever to pass the time. Novelists, short story writers know there are times you say 2 weeks passed, and you don't role play every minute of those 2 weeks on the page. Okay.
Cool. Okay, we have some questions from our attendees. Chris Ballo, if you would like to unmute your microphone and ask your question.
Hello. I was wondering about the future stories and books coming up with the Tree Cats.
Okay.
Is there anything you can tell us?
I can tell you a little bit. We have finished what I just call in my notes SK4, Star Kingdom 4. We don't have a set title on it yet. It's set pretty much almost immediately after Tree Cat Wars for various reasons. And has to do with Stephanie and company accidentally stumbling on information, well, stumbling on phenomena that lead them to believe somebody may be dealing drugs in their immediate vicinity. And because the reason they tag into this is a series of odd occurrences that the adult community would not necessarily be clued into, it works very well as a storyline that keeps our younger characters on deck. And there are all sorts of subplots and other things going on, but that's what most of them rotate around. The book's written and in with Tony, and Weber and I were actually right before Christmas, we're beginning to work out we were beginning to work out what the plot of the next one would be, and we took a break because the holidays were coming up, and then he had to go and almost die on us. So we haven't gotten back to that yet.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we have another question from Carrie. Carrie, you can go ahead and unmute. Go for it.
Hi. This is going to sound off a lot like the last question. I really love the background you do on the Tree Cats.
Yeah.
And I'm really hoping that you're going to expand some more on that in future.
Yes, there is definitely some expansion in Tree Cat culture in this one. We have a character who is a self-exile from Brightwater because he caught a horrible disease that made him the equivalent of Tree Cat deaf and mute. He can still hear what other Tree Cats say, but he can't communicate himself. He can read their mind glows, they can read his mind glows, but the further mind speech is blocked. And so that leads to a lot of background about Tree Cat culture, Tree Cat family structure, because he left behind his children, effectively, several generations of kittens, and is very emotionally damaged. Those of you who read Weber's story Heart of Stone, which was in the tribute anthology to Tim Bolgio, have already met the character Heartstone, and he is one of the main characters in this novel, because Weber sent me the story, and I said, this is a really great character and a really great setup. I think we should carry it forward. So a slightly revised version of that novella or novelette appears at the beginning of the novel, but there's a whole lot more that happens afterwards.
So this takes place well before they learn sign language.
Yes, well, that's okay. One of the greatest handicaps I have in writing in the honor verse is that Weber had already written Honor and Nimitz Discover Everything. So because Honor and Nimitz discover everything, that means, quite frankly, I'm, as a writer, extremely handicapped by the future. There are certain things that we can't do, and I get a little frustrated because I sometimes think that, well, we've done a lot to flesh out why it took so long for humans to catch on to just how smart tree cats are. But as someone who's married to an archaeologist, I personally think the tree cat's material culture should have clued humanity in much faster than they were clued in.
Yeah.
But that's one of the problems with writing a prequel. And it's one of the handicaps that both Weber and I took on when we decided to do these, that we were going to be handicapped by the fact that he had already established that, Nimitz and Honor discover everything. So everybody else has to be unduly handicapped in the past, even though they're not stupid people or stupid tree cats.
Thank you.
We have.
I'd actually love to write a guide to tree cats. I think that would be
really cool.
That would be really cool.
That would be really cool.
I think that, because we've done a lot of work, and I keep asking Weber questions, and he's like, I never really nailed that down, but. The other biggest difficulty with working on Weber with these prequels is, whereas for what you might call the contemporary honor verse, he has a very extensive Bible. He doesn't necessarily have that extensive Bible for the past. And yet at the same time, he's really very, very smart and very, very sharp. And he often has the answer buried in his subconscious as to how something would be, where technology would be at a time, what a cultural development will be, but it's not written down anywhere. So we sort of have to examine it as we go along. So there's an enormous Bible of honor verse material floating around in his head and in connections that hasn't ever been written down.
Sure. We have a question from Danielle that's also tree cat related.
All right.
Go ahead and unmute Danielle and ask your question.
Well, being as I'm also a big fan of the tree cats. I'm curious if we're ever going to learn more about all the different clans and how different clans have different cultures, or how the clans interact, because they have to be incredibly diverse.
No, actually, tree cats are very undiverse, because they have the memory singers, and the memory singers have this tremendous capacity to share enormous amounts of history in, I guess, what you could call data bursts. So actually, tree cats are incredibly conservative in the classic sense, not in the political sense, in the sense that their culture does not change a lot. This is why tree cat culture in Honors Day is not is facing its first big culture shock. Tree cats aren't diverse. Tree cats are incredibly internally regulated by the fact that they are memory singers, have all of these memory songs about what happened. So in Tree Cat Wars, you see, or it's either Tree Cat Wars or Fire Season, I forget which, that they actually remember when humans first came. And it's not like oral storytelling. It's not like, you know, I think I met David Weber in whatever. No, they know exactly. And they remember what it was like when these funny egg-shaped things came down to the planet. And everybody knows this. So they're not diverse. And they tend to, I think of tree cats, they're kind of like hobbits. They're home-loving, family-loving, brave, strong, valiant, valorous, definitely, but they're not at all, they're not very creative because how it was done before is just fine. So someone like Climbs Quickly, who is Stephanie's companion, is a real radical because he is curious about these funny newcomers to the planet. So sadly, no, tree cats really aren't very, very diverse or creative. They're kind of wonderfully, they're hobbits, because I don't want to say they're boring any more than hobbits are boring, but they're very, very culturally locked down.
Patrick Geese has a question.
Yes.
Hey, Jane. First of all, thank you. So Mr. Zelazny
Yes.
was one of my favorite authors. Okay.
Mine too.
I'm sure. And I love the biography, by the way.
Thank you, sir.
Very well written. Also, I've read a number of your books. Most of them are electronic, and so I wasn't going to cheat and jump into my electronic library and pull up the titles and stuff. But I did want to ask, aside from exposure to Roger's work, are there any authors, past or current, that intrigue you as world creators or inspire your sense of writing?
Less authors than specific pieces. Paul Anderson's War of the Wingmen / The Man Who Counts is one of the, I really think, you know, if I was ever to teach a how to write science fiction book, that would be right up there, because it's a wonderful book about not only different cultures, but about the fact that despite the fact that television and movies have made us believe that humans will go to other planets and other planets will automatically be hospitable, and yet that story is so phenomenal, because any story that pivots on somebody manipulating the situation so that the alien bites him in the butt.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what wins the day. Is it shows humor, it shows incredible science, it's just brilliant. Fred Saberhagen's book Mask of the Sun is one of my favorite alternate realities, because he doesn't just, you know, make it be the gun or the whatever, the military tech. It's about so many other things. Tim Powers is far underrated as an author. I mean, literary SF readers love him, but more people who want to know about world building really need to read Tim Powers, because Tim Powers has the gift of finding 3 weird, contradictory things in real history. Like, why the flaming whatever? moderate myself here. Why, when you think about it, would anyone have built Las Vegas, Nevada? It's the stupidest idea in the universe. To make a gambling paradise in the middle of a hot, dry, horrible environment. By the time you finish reading Tim Power's Last Call, you're like, oh, of course, it makes perfect sense. So, Tim Powers to me is, and he's done it with other of his books, The Stress of Her Regard, which takes the peculiarities of Byron, Shelley, Keats, and explains to you that it all makes perfect sense if there were vampires. That's another one I love. And then there are the authors who do what I will never be able to do, and therefore they awe me because I'm always looking at their work and going, how do they pull this off in their world building? Patricia McKillop. I'm just in constant awe of Patricia McKillop and how she manages to make you believe these impossible fairy tale worlds of hers, but how when she turned to science fiction with Fool's Run, you just go, oh, she can do it there too. It doesn't just have to be a fairy tale. Or Terry Pratchett. Dear Lord, the man's brilliant.
Yeah.
People are so busy laughing that they never stop to look at the sheer brilliance of his world building.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I appreciate your writing too as well. Keep
Well,
going.
thank you very, very much, sir.
We have a question from Jay. Jay, go ahead and unmute and ask the lovely doctor your question.
So I too am a gamer. I've spent an irresponsible amount of my life in fantasy worlds and pretending to be someone else. So I really just, I as soon as you said it, my curiosity was inflamed. What is it like playing an RPG with George R.R. Martin? Is he
Go ahead.
is he that bloodthirsty on the with the dice?
No, he's a moron. George loves playing outrageous goofballs. In one of the games we played, we were playing, Walter John Williams was running a game set in late Republic Rome, and George was playing a character who was a sort of up and coming nouveau riche named Pyrrhus Ruffinius. And my character was his bartender, who was also a semi-retired second story man, and who spent most of his time trying to keep Pyrrhus from doing something utterly stupid. So no, George is actually a pretty funny gamer. My husband Jim has gamed with George for eons, and I think that's about right, Jim. Yeah, George is actually far from bloodthirsty, far from vicious. He's very funny, very calculating. He's a trickster rather than a bully. I can see that. I got him one so good. Can you guys handle a gaming story?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Yes.
We were playing a space adventure soap opera game, and George was playing, I was playing the ship's security officer, who was a very small alien, who, if you've read my short story, Small Heroes, I love the character so much I wrote a story about it. But Cadenry was the security officer, and Cadenry did not trust the rock, which was George's character, which was a large sentient rock. So I told the referee off screen that Cadenry was going to arrange to put something into what the rock was eating, because I wanted to be able to track the rock, because I was sure the rock was going to do something. And so George was all set, and he got it all worked up, and we were doing Planet Side and he looked at the referee and he says, and then I fission into however many pieces. And I said, and no problem. I scan and pin you down. And he was like, what? And the referee had kept my note and just handed him the note. And George was so, but no, he's actually much more likely to play a trickster than he is to play a bully, a thug, a bloodthirsty killer.
Cool.
That's, you know, definitely not what he tends to play.
Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
That's very cool. John Stout, go ahead and unmute and ask your question. John Stout.
He's getting
Maybe did he leave?
No, he's here.
Oh, he's right there. He was just right there.
He was just here.
Where'd he go?
I don't know.
Okay. All right. Lori Bonilla, you have a question.
Yes. So how has your experience been as a woman writing in the sci-fi fantasy genre? And do you see any difference of what it was like when you were just starting out as a writer versus how things are now?
You have to understand, I came into the field with my own identity pretty strongly locked in. I had my PhD, I was teaching college. I'm not really a very easy person to walk on. So I never had any problems with some of the things that I've heard my female colleagues talk about with people being, feeling that there was, you know, sexual predation and the like going on. That wasn't something I encountered. I do think of late there has been a real backslide. Publishers seem to be strongly, when I got started, which you've got to remember, my first book came out in 1994. There were, you know, Lois McMaster Bujold was on every award ballot every year, etc. Anne McCaffrey was still actively writing. I can't go back 25 years and pull things out. Marion Zimmer Bradley was still around and a very active element in the field. I feel like that there are not as many diverse, strong female writer things out there. There are a lot of women writers who are writing, but they're often writing stuff that has a very strong romance sub-element, you know, and it just doesn't feel the same. So I'm a little concerned. I mean, I think that there is a little bit of, I don't know, ghettoization going on again, but I'm not quite sure why. I don't blame the immediate editor, the on-deck person who wants to buy fiction, but I think some of the big companies that have bought the publishing corporations want only the bestseller of the moment. And if you watch, you'll notice that somebody is the hot flavor and very few are hot flavors after about 2 years. Weber's longevity is great and such, but the death of the mid-list, I think, has led to the death of a lot of really good fiction. Baen Books really seems to be one of the few that does not seem to just be trying to be riding the trend of the moment. I don't quite know what's going on, but I do think you asked it specifically from the point of view of being a woman and a woman writer. I was really hoping we were heading toward a point that wouldn't be an issue anymore, would all just be writers, but it has definitely definitely backslid. And I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, definitely. John, are you back?
Oh, well, I never left. I just have a mute on my headset.
Ah,
And so that was why I wasn't muted, because I muted myself here as opposed to in Zoom. Back to for Ms. Lindskold, I would like to go back to okay, doctor. Yes, I have a doctor. I have a daughter in that program. I should get used to calling that. But back to the Man Who Counts.
Yes.
When you talk about loving the world building from Paul Anderson, are you talking about just that book, or are you
No,
talking about the entire Pulsatechnic series?
Not every book in that series worked for me, but I do love the stories that he collected in the Earth Book of Stormgate.
Okay.
I really thought that collection was, pure gold for both story, showing how world building and story can work together so well. Paul Anderson was another good example of a writer who could and was permitted to write all over the place in a way writers are not being as permitted these days. So one of the final pieces he was working on before his death was in his Operation Chaos series, which today would probably be, I don't know what they'd classify it as, but it was contemporary fantasy with monsters in the real world. So he could do more than just space adventure, and he was allowed to do more than space adventure.
Well, I mean, I've always liked that particular series because I started it with the Dominic Flandry series.
Right.
And when Baen re-released everything, that was one of the first things I ran out and bought, was every one of those collections.
That's great.
And for gaming, when you said that your first D&D was out of a box set,
Yep.
Are you talking the box set with the horrible red dragon painting?
Yes, and with the dice with the rounded corners, the orange.
Oh God, yes.
Yes,
And the
orange
adventure where you filled in your own monsters.
Yes.
I started that 43 years ago.
Yep.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, John.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right. So Maria, go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Okay. Yes, I had a question for Dr. Lindskold. Is Climbs Quickly, is he very unusual in his curiosity? You mentioned earlier that you compared the tree cats to hobbits, who, as Tolkien wrote, they were just not terribly interested in the larger world around them. They were very inward looking, happy with their own lives, and actually kind of unaware of like the rangers who were protecting them. So did the tree cats as a whole have that same kind of attitude? And is that why it is so rare for them to adopt a human?
Yeah, that's part of it. Climbs Quickly is unusual. If you look at the very beginning of Weber's wonderful novella, A Beautiful Friendship, you'll see that Climbs Quickly is being given a hard time by the other tree cats for his curiosity about the Harringtons. And yep, there you go. Thank you, Jackie. And you'll see he's being given a hard time by them for being unduly curious. And there's another scout who's assigned to kind of keep an eye on him because the group. So Weber and I were talking about tree cat names because I have a little bit of a issue with the fact that they all sound like really bad Anglos come up with Native American names,
Not wrong.
And Weber said that to him, and this is where I say he's really very, very brilliant, but there's a lot of stuff locked down in his head that we don't get to see. To him, it often has a lot to do with an analogy. So Climbs Quickly doesn't just mean this is a cat that moves fast. It means his brain moves fast, and just like a good climber can leap from limb to limb and such, climbs quickly's name doesn't just mean, you know, bouncy climber of trees really fast. It means fast thinker, quick adapter, etc. But that's not the kind of thing that unfortunately we can, you know, explore because of the language gap at this point between humans and tree cats. So we're kind of stuck with, I get the pleasure of hearing Weber say, well, it doesn't just mean, but unfortunately there's not much way we can put that on the page.
Sure.
Because tree cats don't have a spoken language. So because they don't have a spoken language, what we're putting down is these horrible thumpy, you know, fake Native American names are their mental image pictures of people.
Sure.
And so we're sort of hampered because we're stuck with words. And they have this glorious mental, emotional impact that we have to sum up in 1 or 2 words. It's terribly frustrating. If someone would please allow us a way to write telepathic characters better, you know, I would love it, because unfortunately we have to settle for thumpy fake Native American names. I say fake because Jim and I, living in New Mexico, have a fair number of friends who are real live living Native Americans, and you know, they tend to be named things like Jesse and Luann.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
Thank you. Thank you. And I look forward to the tree cat guide. I hope you guys can do one.
I think it would be really neat.
I think it would be awesome.
I
I
think
have
it'd be
one
very
more
cool.
question for you. And that question is, what's next for you? What's coming up? What's coming down the road for you? What can we expect next out of you?
Right now I am, okay, my most recent output has been, I finally did 2 sequels to the Firekeeper saga, Wolf Search and Wolf Soul. And now that those are done, in 2017, I went insane for about 5 months. And I'm not Weber. I don't write. I mean, I write faster than most writers, but Weber is sort of, you know, in another category. But between April and October, I wrote 150,000 words.
Wow.
And then I had to put it on side because I got my rights back to the Firekeeper books from Tor. So I had to do the new ebooks of those. And then I finally had the foundation in place to write Wolf Search and Wolf Soul, which I really wanted to write. So now I'm back to that project, which I had put on side in 2017, because after I wrote Wolf Search and Wolf Soul, I also wrote the fourth Stephanie Harrington book. And so now I'm back to that. The working title, it'll be at least 2 volumes, and the working title is Library of the Sapphire Wind. And it's a fantasy set, it's a portal, sort of a portal fantasy, except instead of it being about teenagers going, you know, it's always teenagers or preteens who get to go to fantasy worlds. I decided it would be really interesting to do it with adults and not in a John Carter of Mars, you know, who gets thumped on the head and astral projects to Mars, or a Thomas Covenant who goes to a fantasy world and is horribly abusive of everybody and everything. But so I have 3 women of a certain age who end up summoned to a fantasy world by 3 roughly 20-somethings, all of whom are lying through their teeth about why they actually did it. And I'm madly, 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 passionately in love with it. And we'll see in what form it comes out, but it's definitely my obsession of the moment. I picked up the manuscript with a little hesitancy, since after all, I hadn't looked at it at the time I picked it up in about 2.5 years. And I thought, am I going to still love this? And, just fell in love all over again. So that's my current project. And I'm really, really, really happy and excited about it.
That sounds really awesome. I'm now like super looking forward to that. Thank you.
Well, I don't know whether I will be able to do the traditional publishing route or do the independent publishing route, but one way or another it'll come out because I'm just in love with it.
I'll find
And
it.
I honestly think there are a lot of people out there who would enjoy going with my people as they investigate a new world and find out, oh, it's too complicated. I'm not Weber. I'm not very good at telling you an entire series in 10 minutes. Just to say that.
Neither is David. Let's be honest.
Yeah, it doesn't take him 10 minutes to do anything.
I'm going to tell you something from somebody who's been a good friend of his for a lot of years. We've been through a lot of hell together. When Roger died, I don't think I would have survived if it hadn't been for Weber. This is in the days that long distance phone calls still cost. And he called me every damn day. And one day he stayed on the phone with me for like 2 hours because he was worried about how depressed I sounded. And he wasn't going to get off the phone until he got me to laugh. He's got a reputation for being a chatterbox, but let me tell you, if you ever need somebody to listen, it's amazing how much of a listener he is too. He's really
we don't mind him being a chatterbox because we get way more stories out of him. But
yeah, but I mean,
short.
But it's not. A lot of people mistake it for ego, and yes, there's ego there, but he's also got a really good heart, a really caring heart, and I would hate to see somebody I value that highly underestimated for just what a good person he is, because he really is a good person. And I wouldn't be married to Jim probably if it wasn't for Weber, because I had been through a divorce. Roger's dying gutted me in a way that I just can't put into words. I mean, I adored that man. And then Jim stumbled into my life. I did not want another relationship. I did not want to fall in love. And I pretty much was telling Weber that, and he was the one who talked me into, at least not running scared. Not necessarily that I had to have another relationship, but he said, don't let yourself run away from something that might be good just because you're really afraid that lightning can't strike twice.
That sounds like
he's somebody I value highly.
Yeah,
mind you, this does not mean that there are not times when we are collaborating that we don't drive each other up the wall.
Well,
but
I think that's any relationship, really.
Yes,
I mean,
but there's a really strong underlying appreciation and affection there. And when he was falling for Sharon, he called me every day. Sharon. He came to visit me and Roger, and he was buying presents for friends back home. And every other present was for Sharon. And I mean, some of them were really pretty elaborate. And I finally said, I thought you said you weren't dating Sharon. And he said, oh, no, we're not. And I said, did she know? Because if a guy came this many presents for me, I'd sort of assume we were dating.
Right.
Yeah, the two of them were the most clueless couple ever.
They are. I mean, I think that's why a lot of us are so involved with TRMN, because we've all gotten the opportunity to know both David and Sharon on a little bit more of a personal level. A lot of us met them, spent time with them, and they're fabulous people. They're just, there's something to be said about, somebody or a couple that can draw the kind of people that are in this fan club, because it's not just about the books, it's about the people.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and I think we follow his lead, their lead. as far as that goes. So,
Yeah.
well, I really want to thank you for being here. I'm a huge fan, so I'm surprised that I could even speak because
Yeah, she was kind of.
you know, I was like so excited when you said yes. But thank you so much for being here. I'm going to end the recording now. You are certainly welcome to hang out with us and chat if you'd like. I know it's getting late, so.
Well, I think what I will probably do is wander off and give Jim some attention because
Sure.
he's been extremely patient. I've stolen his computer.
Yeah.
Aw.
So I'm gonna log off so that he can have either his computer or my company, whichever he prefers.
Sure. Well, thank you
if any of
again
you-
so much. We appreciate you.
Yeah. And if any of you have any other questions, I do answer emails, not necessarily the same day, but I do answer emails. I am on Facebook. I am on Twitter. I am not omnipresent, but I usually check in at least once a day. So feel free, if you're one of those people who has a question, but just really can't bear to ask it in front of a group of people, to email me your question and I'll get back to you.
Great.
So thank you all for your kindness.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank you,
good
Jane.
night. Stay
Appreciate
safe.
it.
Stay healthy.
Thank you.